Dinesh Kanabar, Deputy CEO and Chairman of the Tax Practice with KPMG joins us now. Dinesh, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Dinesh, GAAR indeed is the big story. Will the GAAR deferral till April 2006 provide sufficient time to India Inc. to accommodate itself to a new aggressive tax avoidance regime?
I do think it does. So globally there have always been debates in and around GAAR before GAAR provisions have been implemented. It happened in the UK, etc. And in fact, if I look at the SHOAM committee itself over a period of 8 weeks held extensive deliberations with people. I remember having gone to the committee at least on 3 separate occasions, and so did others. And in fact, all of this has been documented by the committee. And more important, there was a draft report, there were representations on the draft, it became final. So that itself really encompasses a body of knowledge and representations. And a 2-year, I think, is a definitive good time frame for people to come to grips with the new regime.
Dinesh, hi, morning. But isn't the grandfathering for investment before August 10th, 2010 a sweetener?
The finance minister, so to say, has accepted the principle of grandfathering, but has restricted it to August 10, when the provisions of the DTC, which encompass GAAR, were first enacted. And I think it's a very reasonable way to move forward, in my opinion, because once GAAR provisions were put in the public domain, then there was, so to say, a notice. And any planning, so to say, done prior to that, if it is protected, that's a reasonable grandfathering provision. So in effect, what we are seeing out here is, for example, India-Mauritius treaty, which I'm sure is a very critical aspect of GAAR. All those investments which have been made prior to August 2010, irrespective of a point of time when they are disposed of, will be not covered by the GAAR regime, and so to say the treaty will be protected so long as those investments are existing and for the income that is made out of those investments. Again, a very, very welcome step.
Dinesh, typically what are the kind of investment or deals pre-30th of August 2010 which are now off the hook, and will they mostly constitute PE deals routed through Mauritius and Singapore?
Investments made up to August sold at a later point of time will not encounter GAAR. So all the investments which all the private equity have made, all the investments that have been made by under the FDI route, irrespective of whenever they are unscrambled, whenever the gain occurs, will continue to be protected.
Dinesh, but the new norms say that GAAR's panel's decisions will be binding on both the IT department as well as companies. Also, the panel has been reconstituted with a High Court judge heading it. Do you think this will bring a kind of balance?
The more important part is the approving panel's constitution. The committee had recommended a 5-person panel. What the finance minister has come up is a 3-person panel comprising of a retired judge, not below the rank of a high court, a bureaucrat from within the revenue service, so a person not below the rank of a chief commissioner, and then an external expert. And let me tell you, it's a very, very significant change. This is probably for the first time under the provisions of the Income Tax Act that a non-revenue person is a part of a panel which is actually administering tax laws. First and foremost, it should give a comfort to the taxpayers that whenever a transaction is looked at, it is looked at from a business perspective, not just from a tax perspective. And let me elaborate a bit why I say this. What tends to happen is you make business decisions, and those decisions are reviewed after a period of 3 to 4 years. And then it becomes very easy to attack it as being purely driven by tax. That's incorrect, really. One has to view business decisions in the light of business realities. And the fact that you have an external expert and a high court judge reviewing this whole thing gives very good comfort.
Dinesh, do you think the monetary threshold of rupees 3 crore of tax benefit in the deal arrangement is just too low? I mean, 3 crore is hardly anything.
One can comment on that. Essentially, you are looking at a 10 crore adjustment for a 3 crore tax limit. The question really is that if you look at from a perspective of foreign investments, probably gains which arise are so significant that this threshold may look too low. I think generally for a going in proposition, it looks to me like a very reasonable proposition. I don't see a challenge with that.
Right. But the tax auditor now has an obligation to report any tax avoidance arrangement as well. Will that then increase the onus on auditors and dilute the auditor-promoter nexus?
In fact, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very interesting recommendation. So this recommendation actually was there in the SHOAM committee's report. So the SHOAM committee came back to say that how does really a tax officer even become aware of such an arrangement which could be a potential impermissible arrangement? And I think this is going to change radically the way the tax profession in this country operates. Because you certainly are going to have a situation where a tax officer has to sit in a subjective shoe of a revenue official or an approving panel and report those arrangements which could potentially come under the threshold of an impermissible arrangement. It's going to be a sea change on how profession approaches its own job, and it's going to be an onerous task. At the same time, I do not see any reason why something which is so apparent as to constitute an impermissible arrangement should not be examined by an auditor. But there's going to be very, very significant change.
Fair point. Dinesh, but GAAR will clearly override tax treaties now. Will this be a scare for business out of Mauritius, because the new law will now have an impact on how movement or treaties will move from Mauritius?
Two things. First, if I look at GAAR provisions anywhere in the world, everywhere you have a situation where GAAR provisions override the provisions of the tax treaty. That's the essential effect. You are providing for a domestic override on a tax treaty in a situation which is abusive in nature. So this is consistent with what happens all over the world. The other comment I would make is that if you look at Mauritius treaty, what is happening at this point of time? First, we have pushed back the implementation to 2016. So we only have to examine something post 2016. The SHOAM committee had made a recommendation, and there is no mention about that in the finance minister's statement today, that even after the general NTA avoidance rules have been enacted, if there is a tax residence certificate issued by the government of Mauritius, that will continue to be binding. What the SHOAM committee said, and it was a very pragmatic report, to say that if there are issues on the tax treaty, they have to be resolved between the two governments rather than put them at an implementation level. I would be very keen to see how is the government looking at that representation and whether that ultimately gets into a notification or not.